Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave.
On behalf of every father and every mother.
Wings for freedom. On behalf of our warriors.
And paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. First off, it seems that some technical issues have been resolved and we are now once again live on Twitter. So hello to anyone listening on Twitter. Briefly, of course, we love Twitter. We love our audience on Twitter. You guys are great. We just want to let you know that you might get a better viewing experience on YouTube. So you can always check us out on YouTube. We have the channel Tochnyi on YouTube. So thanks for our platform Restream for sorting out all the kinks with Twitter. Hi to the Twitter people. And hi, as always, to the YouTube people. We do have a great show for you today. If you could, please do hit the like button and subscribe on whatever platform you're currently viewing. Check us out on Twitter and Blue Sky. We do social media posts there as well. And of course, we have our website, tochnyi.info. That's where we publish articles. We have interactive maps and other cool stuff. So check out our website, tochnyi.info. Chad, if you have any questions, we will do our best. We'll do the YouTube ones for sure. We'll take a look at Twitter and see if we can work those in. But it's been it'll be a bit of a technical hurdle to see all the questions from Twitter. But if you guys do have any questions, please do type them in the chat and we'll do our best to address them towards the end of the broadcast. First, I'll be presenting the news. That'll be followed by a discussion of the Russian economy. We'll talk briefly about some other stuff, and then we will have a presentation by one of our contributors about an article that was recently published. So without any further delay, I will now present the news. These are the main headlines as of February 15th, 2026. First up, we have operations. Ukrainian long-range drones carried out a deep strike inside Russian territory, reaching nearly to the Ural Mountains and damaging an oil refinery roughly 1,700 kilometers from Ukraine in a straight line, a distance that up until now was widely considered to be beyond reach. The facility targeted belonged to Lukoil in the city of Ukhta, located in Russia's Komi Republic. Video circulating online showed dense black smoke rising from the site after the impact. The attack is regarded as the longest confirmed drone operation in the war to date. During the same night, additional strikes ignited a fire at a defense manufacturing plant in Tambov Oblast and caused power disruptions in Bryansk Oblast. Ukraine's general staff reported successful hits on the Progress defense factory and several other targets. The refinery in Ukhta, known as Ukhtan-Neftia Pererabotka, was struck on the morning of the 12th of February. Russian telegram channel Astra reported that the attack produced a towering plume of dark smoke above the complex. Footage released online appeared to show drones resembling Ukraine's long-range Lysenko strike drone flying over the city shortly before the incident. The refinery itself was said to process approximately 2 million tons of crude in 2020. The Lysenko drone is designed for long-distance missions with a stated range of about 2,000 kilometers. It carries an explosive payload estimated at 50 to 75 kilograms and uses AI to navigate autonomously, allowing it to operate even when satellite navigation signals are disrupted by electronic countermeasures. The strike on Ukhta likely surpasses previous distance records for Ukrainian drone attacks. Earlier operations reached targets significantly closer. In May of 2024, Ukrainian drones struck an early warning radar installation in Ors near the Kazakhstan border, around 1,500 kilometers from the front line. Later that year, in October and November, oil infrastructure in the same area was also targeted. Ukrainian forces have additionally conducted repeated attacks against a facility in Yelabuga, Tatarstan, where Shahed-type drones are produced, which is located roughly 1,150 kilometers from Ukraine. Some media reports cited a distance of 2,000 kilometers to Ukhta, but that estimate appears to come from road travel calculations rather than a direct aerial route. A straight line measurement places the distance closer to 1,700 kilometers. Ukrainian cyber specialists from the 256th Cyber Assault Division carried out a targeted operation aimed at uncovering Starlink terminals being used by Russian forces. They collaborated with the Inform Napalm Intelligence Network and a Telegram channel known as Militant to execute the plan. As part of the effort, the group set up a web of counterfeit online channels and automated accounts that advertised paid services to activate Starlink devices. The purpose was to expose how opposing forces were maintaining communications despite restrictions. By posing as service providers, they were able to draw in users connected to the Russian military and gather actionable information. Within a single week, the operation amassed 2,420 distinct data transmissions linked to the terminals. The collected material included precise geographic coordinates, enabling Ukrainian defense units to pinpoint areas where troops and military hardware were clustered near active communication equipment. Beyond the technical intelligence, organizers documented 31 inquiries from people offering to act as intermediaries or drops to help register and activate devices. Details about these suspected collaborators were passed on to Ukrainian law enforcement authorities for further handling. The scheme also generated financial gains, bringing in approximately $5,870 from payments made by Russian service members. According to the organizers, the money will be redirected to support the immediate needs of Ukraine's armed forces. Comprehensive data on the identified terminals was shared with volunteer Serhiy Sternenko with the intention of enabling the devices to be disabled in territories under occupation. However, the method started losing its effectiveness after numerous other groups began producing similar fake chatbots, making the approach easier to detect. Ukraine is testing a domestically developed laser weapon intended to counter Russian unmanned aircraft. Reporting by The Atlantic indicates that Ukrainian engineers created the system, known as Sunray, largely due to limited supplies of conventional air defense missiles and the growing scale of one-way drone attacks. Development of the project was said to have taken approximately 2 years. The Sunray system neutralizes small airborne targets by directing an intense laser beam at them, either burning through the structure of the drone or disrupting its internal electronics. Creators say that the weapon operates with minimal noise and doesn't rely on physical munitions, eliminating the need for consumable ammunition. Designed for mobility, the system is compact enough to be installed on a pickup truck or similar light vehicle, allowing crews to relocate quickly as battlefield conditions change. Developing the prototype reportedly required several $1 million, while future production units are expected to cost in the hundreds of thousands, far less than advanced surface-to-air missile systems. Ukraine's push toward laser defenses is driven in part by shortages of traditional interception systems. Western allies have been unable to provide enough missiles for Ukraine, and using high-cost interceptors against large numbers of inexpensive drones is widely viewed as financially impractical. Directed energy weapons are therefore seen as a useful addition to layered air defense, particularly for short-range threats such as loitering munitions and surveillance UAVs. However, the technology still remains under development. Engineers need to address technical and organizational challenges, especially integrating the weapon into existing command and control networks that coordinate air defense operations. If testing proves successful, Ukraine could join a small group of nations fielding laser weapons under actual combat conditions to defend against drones. In 2025, Ukraine's unmanned systems forces also publicly demonstrated another laser system called Tryzub for the first time and outlined its claimed capabilities. Military officials stated that that system can engage attack drones, guided bombs, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles at ranges of up to 3 kilometers, as well as helicopters, aircraft, and reconnaissance drones at distances of 5 kilometers. Up next, we have economy and aid. The UK plans to provide an extra £500 million, equivalent to around $681 million, to reinforce Ukraine's air defense capabilities. The financial commitment comes as Russia continues to use extensive missile and drone strikes against Ukrainian urban areas and civilian infrastructure, attacks that have contributed to a deepening energy crisis across the country. The new agreement comes shortly after the UK agreed to participate in NATO's US-led Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List program, committing £150 million to help procure urgently needed American-made weapons for Ukraine. And speaking of Pearl, Japan is preparing to participate in the NATO-coordinated program that organizes the purchase and delivery of US-made military supplies for Ukraine, becoming the first Asian country to do so. Tokyo's contribution will be restricted to defensive items classified as non-lethal, funded through the Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List. Under the plan, Japan would finance equipment such as radar systems and protective gear, including body armor. Officials indicate that Tokyo has already held consultations with several NATO members and Ukrainian representatives to outline the proposal. One alliance official emphasized that even equipment not intended for offensive use remains vital for Ukraine's defense, calling Japan's planned involvement an important step. Alliance representatives expect Japan to formally confirm its participation in the near future. India's largest oil refiners had declined new offers to purchase Russian crude scheduled for loading in March and April, a move that comes as New Delhi advances toward a trade agreement with the United States. The change follows a decision by the U.S. president to withdraw tariffs previously imposed on Indian exports over the purchases of Russian oil, asserting that India had pledged to halt such imports, although Indian authorities have not publicly confirmed any formal commitment. After Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, India became the biggest buyer of discounted Russian seaborne crude. Imports peaked at more than 2 million barrels per day in mid-2025, but by December they had fallen to their lowest level in 2 years. Major state and private refiners, including Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, and Reliance Industries, are currently declining new shipments of Russian crude for the coming months. Refining sector sources noted that some deliveries for March had already been arranged earlier. Most other refiners in the country are also said to be avoiding new purchases. Officials have characterized the reduction as part of a broader strategy to diversify energy supplies. A foreign ministry spokesperson said that adjusting sourcing patterns in response to market conditions and shifting global circumstances is central to ensuring energy security for the world's most populous country. As Russian imports decrease, refiners have increased purchases from suppliers in the Middle East, Africa, and South America. Industry sources indicated that companies could reconsider Russian supplies if instructed by the government to do so. The developments coincide with progress toward a U.S.-India trade framework announced on February 6th, which both sides aim to finalize by March and which would lower tariffs and expand economic ties. While the joint statement did not mention Russian oil, the U.S. president lifted a 25% tariff on Indian goods, stating that India had agreed to stop acquiring Russian crude either directly or indirectly. New Delhi has not publicly endorsed that claim. The executive order accompanying the tariff rollback also said that U.S. officials would track India's oil purchases and could recommend reimposing tariffs if imports from Russia resume. France's Total Energies has assumed complete control of the Zeeland oil refinery in the Netherlands after reacquiring the 45% share previously owned by Russia's sanctioned energy company Lukoil. The transaction comes as sweeping U.S. sanctions imposed on Lukoil are compelling Russia's second-largest oil producer to divest major holdings abroad. Lukoil originally purchased its stake in the refinery in 2009 for roughly $725 million during a state visit by Russia's president. The sanctions introduced last October have placed pressure on the company to dismantle an overseas portfolio estimated at around $22 billion in value, with the Zeeland facility among the first assets to be transferred. Although the refinery, which processes around 180,000 barrels of oil per day, was not directly targeted by U.S. sanctions due to Lukoil's minority position, concerns emerged that suppliers might avoid dealing with a facility connected to a sanctioned entity. Those risks appear to have prompted Total Energies to consolidate ownership to ensure uninterrupted operations. The sanctions environment has also influenced refining economics. Total Energies reported that its European refining margin indicator surged by 231% year-over-year in the fourth quarter of 2025. The company's chief executive attributed the shift to restrictions affecting major participants in Russian oil trading, suggesting the broader market had not fully grasped the impact of sanctions on key industry players. Dutch authorities stated that no government approval was necessary for the ownership change because the refinery itself had never been formally sanctioned. Neither Total Energies nor Lukoil disclosed whether the transfer involved a financial payment or exchange of assets tied to Total Energies' remaining operations in Russia. Up next, we have international relations. Ukraine's president held a meeting with Reza Pahlavi, the exiled Iranian crown prince, during the Munich Security Conference. During the talks, the Ukrainian leader expressed sympathy for those affected by the current Iranian authorities and affirmed Ukraine's support for the Iranian people's aspirations. The discussion centered on conditions inside Iran and ways the international community could assist its population. The Ukrainian president said they also addressed the need to intensify sanctions against Iran's ruling authorities as well as other authoritarian governments. Both participants criticized the growing cooperation between Russia and Iran, highlighting the transfer of Shahed drones and production rights that have enabled their manufacturing for use against Ukraine. They warned that the collaboration represents a significant danger not only to Ukraine but broader regional stability. The Ukrainian president also thanked the exiled crown prince for backing Ukraine's territorial sovereignty, stressing the importance of collective efforts to safeguard human life and indicating Ukraine's willingness to contribute where possible. According to the office of the Ukrainian president, the crown prince in turn expressed appreciation for Ukraine's decision to designate the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization. And last item this week, Russia has appointed presidential aide Vladimir Medinsky to head its delegation at the upcoming trilateral negotiations with Ukraine and the U.S., scheduled for the 17th and 18th of February in Geneva, replacing the military intelligence chief Igor Kostyukov, who led Moscow's team during the 2 earlier rounds of talks in Abu Dhabi. The change was announced on the 13th of February by the Kremlin spokesperson. A political analyst described Medinsky as an ideologically driven public figure focused on shaping historical narratives rather than as a technical expert. Medinsky previously led negotiations in Istanbul in May of 2025, where he reportedly cited misattributed remarks from historical figures to argue against a ceasefire and told Ukrainian representatives that Russia was prepared to continue the war for as long as necessary. Ukraine's president later dismissed the delegation as insincere. Ukrainian officials characterized the Abu Dhabi negotiations under Kostukov as more constructive. Earlier reporting indicated that U.S. officials had signaled a preference for Moscow to send less hardline representatives to negotiations, but the Kremlin nonetheless selected Medinsky. Ukraine's negotiating team will remain the same. The delegation will again be led by the Secretary of National Security and Defense Council, who headed the previous rounds in Abu Dhabi, and will include the head of the presidential office, the chief of the general staff, and several other senior officials representing military, political, and security sectors. Medinsky's influence extends into the realm of state-directed historical policy. He chairs an interagency commission on historical education established by presidential decree, whose membership includes major security and prosecutorial bodies. The commission was created to promote a coordinated approach to defending Russia's national interests through historical messaging. In his role as a presidential aide, Medinsky oversaw revisions to Russian school textbooks that portray Ukraine as an extremist, hostile state and frame the full-scale invasion as a defensive action. He has publicly argued that historical interpretation matters more than factual detail, asserting that narratives shaped by patriotism will naturally present a positive portrayal of one's country. These views have also appeared in diplomatic contexts. During negotiations and public statements, Medinsky has repeated the Kremlin's position that Russians and Ukrainians constitute a single people, a stance widely interpreted by analysts as denying Ukraine's independent nationhood. His appointment to lead the talks seems to signal a hardline approach from Moscow as discussions continue. And that's it for the main headlines this week. We will now move. Okay, so we got a few things to talk about in Russia this week. First, I think, Stanimir, we'll start with some kind of minor news. There was a recent reform in Rosguardia, which is basically like the Russian National Guard. It's used for a lot of police actions, but of course it's also used for military actions. There have been some Rosguardia units and stuff in Ukraine. So I think it's worth kind of keeping tabs on them as an organization. Stanimir, what can you tell us about the recent changes in Rosguardia?
Well, the recent changes are, before this, they already had started getting a tank unit, and now they're getting an expanded staff for their headquarters of the Russian Guard. I would also point out that it's more of a policing structure, an anti-riot unit, than it is an actual armed force. And it's more to counter internal pressures than it is to counter external pressures. Because we usually get the figure that it's around 370,000 people, but you have to understand that part of the Russian Guard and the way it was created is specialist units from the police that the police still need to use when there's a hostage situation, for example, and also a lot of, how should I put it, mall cops, because the structure that they incorporated that makes up around 1/3 to maybe 1/2 of the total number of officers in the Rosguard is basically a state security company that does personal security. So people who guard buildings, people who guard malls, people who guard banks, that sort of stuff. But apart from that, it's not that big of a change. It's something that was going to happen anyway. It's not going to impact the war so much as it's going to impact probably the authority it has to conduct domestic security.
Okay, thanks for that. And of course, next we have the big news about Russia this week was, of course, the Telegram ban. So I think, there's been a lot of discussion among Russians about the implications of this ban. I would say pretty much everyone agrees it's a really significant change to Russia's ability to conduct communications on the front lines and coordinate militarily. Russia's trying to push all military communication onto a state-run messaging app called Max, which is widely considered to be inferior to Telegram for the purposes that soldiers use it for. And yeah, there's been like a lot of discussion. So Stanimir, if you wanted to maybe talk a little bit about the reaction in the Russian-speaking press and blog community, might be interesting.
I would put the reaction as everyone losing their minds, because it's not just that it does that Max has inferior features. Max is missing features. So, for example, for businesses and companies, there is no equivalent of a business channel for Max so far. This is something they're going to release in the spring. It's also more buggy. But the initial reaction, if you wanted to see some high-profile reactions, apart from the military bloggers in Russia who are all basically losing their minds, the leader of the Duma faction at Just Russia just started swearing in front of cameras that the people who banned or technically throttled Telegram were morons that didn't know what they were doing, and people were dying because of them. Similarly, the governor of Belgorod, which is the most impacted by Ukrainian drone attacks city in Russia, he actually said that this is making it harder for people to be safe, because right now with the throttling of Telegram, people don't get alerts that there is a missile danger or drone danger, and they can't go to any proper shelter facilities. So everyone was impacted by this and continues to be impacted by this. I don't think, besides a few talking heads that are required to state propaganda, like Peskov, who said that it was news to him that the Russian army was using it to such a degree. I don't think anyone else has actually had a positive reaction. Even figures like Mizulina were completely against it, and she's the usual person who is for the safety of the internet for Russians. This is something that's costing them money, and it's costing them lives in real time.
I just wanted to add that Max isn't a military communications platform. It's rather where the Russians want the military to communicate to the public, if that's connected to the military in any way or form. But what the Kremlin is saying is that they don't need to use Telegram or Max or any other communication platforms like this in the military, because they have dedicated comms platforms within the Russian armed forces. Obviously, that has also caused a lot of outrage among Russian soldiers, because these systems are apparently not available to everyone, and also not functioning as good as they needed to be. It's probably not flexible enough. So yeah, I think that's a little bit. It's important to be accurate about the differences between the military communication platform and Telegram or Max as a messaging app that they use in order to communicate with the public. But that told, yes, the Russians have been using Telegram for communications in the military very extensively, because they don't really have the needed access or flexibility within their state-run communication platforms for the military.
Yeah, like we've seen people call for airstrikes on Telegram on the Russian side, right?
Yeah. In the beginning, that was happening all the time, but it's less common now. But I think they probably do that in closed groups to the same extent, if even maybe not even more. So.
And definitely, I'd say the primary arm for Russian civilian fundraising. Body armor, vehicles, drones, things like that, right?
Yeah, that and VK. So it's essentially the way a unit can communicate to the public, but also they have closed groups where they coordinate things. They have a history of all their chats, and they don't want to lose that, because it's useful to have access to old stuff when you need to reference something. They have groups where they communicate between the drone manufacturing groups and the units on the ground that are receiving the groups, etc. So switching all that over to Max, when you first of all you don't trust that the government isn't going to look into what you do and punish you for certain things in the Max groups, is probably also one of the reasons why the Russians are very angry, because previously they at least thought or had a pretty good confidence that what they were saying inside closed Telegrams groups weren't even possible to monitor for the Russian government. But that's not the case with Max, right? So
yeah, Max is a spyware disguised as a messenger primarily. And something else I should add that wasn't noticed as much because of the Telegram throttling and ban, they also fully banned WhatsApp this week. That was the next step. They first banned calls, but now WhatsApp is fully banned as well. So Russians are getting hit on many fronts when it comes to communications this week.
Yeah, and I think that, as Erlend pointed out here, Peskov appeared to have been kind of incredulous toward the idea that Telegram was used so extensively in military communications. This is like a presidential spokesman close enough to Putin that it's kind of concerning, I would say, to Russian war hawks that how out of touch they are. There was a post by a Russian blogger that I think is kind of an interesting summation of their views on this. So again, Peskov said, "I don't think it's possible to imagine frontline communication is provided through Telegram. Such a thing is unimaginable," is what he said. So this blogger says, what else is unimaginable, right? It's unimaginable that a week ago our troops' communications relied on an enemy satellite constellation. Of course, he's referring to Starlink. That soldiers still obtain many essential items for war and military life through volunteers, that the entire country supplies the army with civilian vehicles while the army tries to stop them, that soldiers are kept on serving forever, like they when their contract's in, they don't get to go home, that except in the most horrific cases, losses aren't taken into account by the command, that they still consider it seditious to even talk about losses in combat, that the enemy's bombarding Russian population centers and nothing's being done about it, that the special forces in Ukraine or spies and such are managing to hit high-level targets like generals and things in Moscow, that they've thrown tons of resources at the war and they haven't been able to achieve a decisive advantage, that they only stopped selling oil directly through Ukraine in pipelines after Ukraine themselves shut it off, that the citizens web histories and things are searched for various reasons. There's more scrutiny about their own online activity, that there's a business being made out of people who want to avoid punishment, like public officials who get in trouble in Russia go pretend to serve on the front for a period of time to kind of exonerate themselves, and they don't actually do any real fighting. They just they go and whitewash their image. That developers of drones and other weapons aren't allowed to bring their developments to the front because influential people with more connections are able to kind of push them aside and get their own stuff put out, which is subpar. And that the internet is arbitrarily shut down thousands of kilometers from the combat zone for the sake of safety from air raids and shelling. So I think that's a pretty good summary of the general list of grievances that the Russian war hawks are currently attributing to their leadership. I think the view is that the leadership is fundamentally out of touch with what's going on. You have people like Peskov who don't seem to understand these problems. And then you have the people that are maybe closer to the reality of the situation that very clearly do. And, I guess it's a good thing for Ukraine that these problems haven't been addressed, even though they've had quite some time to deal with all of them. And that it doesn't appear, not only does it appear that they're not being addressed, it appears that the people who are influential enough to make serious decisions about it are fundamentally misinformed or out of touch about what's going on. So, I thought it was a good summary list. Anything else we should mention about the Telegram ban, Erlend?
Well, I think that the post that we have, or the two posts that we have up on screen, are kind of summing up what the sentiment has been among some of the Russian war bloggers and probably a lot of the soldiers as well. because obviously this has been a way for both the war bloggers and Russian soldiers on the ground to communicate what the actual situation is for them on the ground. But now, as they're being forced to move over on Max, where they know that the Kremlin can see who's writing what, and probably even look into their phones and stuff, truthfulness will probably be a lot further away from the people, because they will be afraid to post what the real situation is on the ground. When the Kremlin has one narrative, like for instance that they occupy a zone or captured a new village, etc., but the reality on the ground is much more different. Like in Kupiansk, for instance, the Russian general staff still says that they have control over the city, even though Russian war bloggers and soldiers on the ground have disputed that. And obviously we have quite well documented Ukrainian footage that tells another story. These things will not be easy for the Russians to communicate to the people, and also probably even between military units. We're going to have to see much more siloed communication channels within the Russian military, which the Kremlin probably thinks is a good thing. But the reality is that I think this is going to be a positive thing for Ukraine.
And one more thing, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, that's all. Go ahead.
One more thing that I have to add is that before you could avoid a bit of the spyware from Max when it comes to monitoring your communications by opening it through a browser. But right now in Russia, more and more services require Max to actually access them. So this is new from this week. The State Services app, where you do all your communication and work with the government from your mobile device. Now that requires to open it, to log in, it's required that you install Max on your phone. And this is on top of already new phones requiring Max to be pre-installed before they sell it to you. So there's no avoiding it. They're pushing it all the way. It's something that's becoming unavoidable as an app on Russian mobile devices, even if you have 2 or 3.
Yeah, and I think the obvious analog model here is probably China, which has a lot of state-owned services that the government pushes on people to so that they can properly monitor and regulate them. But I think in the case of China, they're at least viewed as effective, right? Like Ali Chat and all that, or WeChat, I should say. They at least are able to do the job. It seems like Max itself isn't ready for all of the stuff that they're putting on it yet. So I guess we'll see if this Russian push to nationalize their online communications system, eventually kind of sorts out all of the problems. But right now it looks like pretty much a complete disaster. It doesn't look like there's really any upside to all of this for the Russians, which of course for Ukraine is a good thing. So I guess we'll keep tabs on that stuff. And I think that's all the stuff I had for you this week, Stanimir. So maybe we could go to your general report now.
Yes, and for starters, I want to talk about electricity bills in Russia. So something that happened with January, and it was the big news this week, was the new bills for utilities, which I mentioned that have grown sometimes by 50%. When it comes to electricity, they've grown even further. So the 2 examples I have that are outliers are in Leningrad region. They received a bill for 142,000 rubles. So that's close to 1,500 euros for electricity alone, just for 1 month. And a similar bill was received from a family living in a house in Kaliningrad, where they got an electricity bill for 126,000 rubles, so close to 1,380 euros. These are astronomical prices. Probably in the rest of the world, you can heat yourself for more than a year with that. But in Russia, this is the new normal. Now, what they did was they managed to squeeze people on both ends. So what Russia has is in every region, they have a tiered system. So for consumption up to a certain point, you have the first tier. That is usually around 4 rubles per kilowatt hour. And then after the second tier, that increases a bit. And then there's a third tier, which is for the remaining after that, which is the highest price. So we have an example here that Evgeny Strebin managed to find in Veliki Novgorod in their electrical company. So what they did was they increased the price of the first tier by what is the official amount. So the official amount is set into law. It's around 14 to 15%. For all of Russia, it was between 10 and 15%, I think, or 10 and 17%, something of that order. And they increased it by 14.5%, and by another 1.7% this year. So it rose from 4 rubles and 14 kopeki for a kilowatt hour to 4 rubles and 74. So that's a normal increase. Then we have the other tariffs for the second tier. It went up not by the legal amount of 14.5%. No, it went up from 4 rubles and 20 to 8 rubles and 20. So a 95% increase, or almost a 96% increase. And for the third tier, it went from 6 rubles and 30 to 13 rubles and 64 for kilowatt hours. So over 100% increase. If we look at Rostat, officially by Rostat, they only count the first increase. But if you're heating yourself with electricity, you usually go into the second and third tier, depending on what's happening. So the other way they squeeze people is they reduce the amount in the tiers. So the threshold, which used to be 3,500 kilowatt hours for the first tier, that was decreased 3 times to just 1,200 kilowatts. The threshold of 5,500 kilowatts for the second tier, that was decreased to 2,500 kilowatts. And after that, you got into the third tier. So what happened is that if you have a low usage of around 1,000 kilowatts per hour, yes, kilowatts hour per month, you have an increase of just 14.5% in your bill. That's okay. But if you're heating yourself with electricity, you're going into the 3,000 kilowatt hours range per month to the 6,000 kilowatt hours range per month, to even further, depending on how cold it is, how well insulated your home is, and where you're located in terms of if you're in a house or in an apartment building that gets heated altogether. So what we found out that when we did these calculations is that if you're looking at 3,000 kilowatt hour per month usage, the increase is actually 87% in your bill. And so you went from paying something like, let me see, something like 12,000 rubles, you went to over 23,000 rubles. And for the second case, for the third case, actually, if you're looking at the increase, it's 146%. You're going from 26,000 rubles to 64,000 rubles. And at 64,000 rubles, we're talking about 700 euros per month for electricity, which is something Russians can't afford. Because let me give you an example. The average pension in Russia for some of the people who will be heating themselves with electricity is 25,000 rubles. So they have to spend 3 pensions just to heat themselves if that's their consumption during the year. And for 3,000, it's their entire pension just goes for it. And that's not that outrageous, given that someone could live in a 80 square meter apartment. So the other interesting thing here is that this is not something that Russians can challenge. This is something that's already part of the laws that has been agreed, and this is going to be the new normal from here on out. These are going to be the bills they get. And for reference, around 7% of the urban population aren't heated by central heating of any form. So that's where you pack in coal, wood, and electricity. For the urban population, it's mainly electricity. 28% of the rural population isn't heated by central heating. So we're talking, again, wood, coal, or electricity. But the bigger thing is that of those that are supplied with central heating, we know that around 20% of them don't actually rely entirely on that. They're heating themselves partially or fully by electricity. And if you have an outage of the heating, you're resorting to electricity to heat yourself. That's as has happened in Russia multiple times. And people aren't getting decreases in their electricity bills just because the heating is out. There are individual cases when the governor intervenes where they get discounts, but the majority aren't getting those. So Russians will probably have to start rioting by March if they want this to change and for them not to pay electricity bills that are in some cases as high or higher than their mortgage. So yeah, this is the biggest story right now in Russia when it comes to domestic issues and kitchen table sort of issues. So going on from there, we also have news on the unemployment in Russia. So between December 2025 and December 2024, it decreased by 0.1% to 2.2%. Essentially, Russia should be viewed as at full employment, and the remaining who are unemployed cannot be employed for various reasons that salaries alone can't actually account for. And it was also leaked that there are about 250,000 veterans of the war who couldn't find a job. That news was later deleted, and the news story was adjusted to say just tens of thousands. Just to put it into perspective, 250,000 would be around 25 to 30, maybe 35% of all unemployed Russian males. So we can see one group that can't be employed easily. So we're not expecting that to decrease. Also, the other big news when it comes to Russia this week and the economy, the Russian central bank decreased the interest rate by 0.5%. They also, however, adjusted their projections for 2026. It went from a range of 13 to 15% average interest rate for the year, and for 2027 from 7.5 to 8.5% to 8 to 9%. And for 2026, now it's expected 13.5 to 14.5% to be the average. So they projected that they're going to slow down their decrease of the interest rates from what they previously planned. Also, they raised their targets for inflation for 2026 from 4% to 5%. Now it's 4.5 to 5.5%. And the other thing that was interesting, given that the data we're getting from February, is that the peak of the inflation in Russia occurred between December 2024 and January 2026. I don't expect that to be the case. We're seeing still high inflation in January, and that inflation isn't linked to just the new VAT increases. I would point out that cucumbers have risen in price by over 50% just for the year of 2026, without accounting for any part of 2025. You've already seen, and I mentioned it last week, that cucumbers are being compared to the price of meat right now in Russia, and that's not the only thing that's rising as high, that even though it's the poster child. Also, the Russian central bank changed its projection for the Russian oil price, which said that it could lead to further inflation if it keeps being this low. So for the Russian oil in 2026, they expect the average price to be $45 per barrel and $50 for 2027. I want to say that in the budget, the price cutoff point for Russian oil is set at $59 per barrel for 2026. So we're looking at a huge deficit there. We also had information from the Russian Far East Railways. According to them, in January 2026, the container traffic on the Far Eastern Railway decreased by 11% to almost 111,000 TEUs, and loaded containers actually decreased by even further, by 13.4% to 103,000 TEUs. The big story when it comes to the oil and gas sector, as you've probably seen, is that Russian insurance companies that provided insurance for targets of possible drone attacks reported losses of 1 trillion rubles by the sites that were struck. However, this also includes lost revenue and not just direct damages. For direct damages, we're probably looking at a few hundred billion rubles less, but the losses for insurers meant that this new insurance product is vastly unprofitable for them. The final part from the main news story is that the Russian Central Bank also released its business climate index, and it's now at the lowest level it has been since 2022 at just 0.2, and it's going to go into the negative soon if this continues. So despite the upbeat December, when it comes to Russian businesses, they're not viewing anything as positively as the Kremlin would want. When it comes to banking, we had two news stories that were larger. We had data on Russian cash loans issuance for January 2026. They decreased for a third month in a row when compared to the previous month. So they're down 14.5% compared to December 2025. However, at a positive note, they're 7.3% higher than in January 2025 at 1.38 million loans. And the interest rates on new car loans in December rose by 0.8% to 13.8%. This is because it's a secured loan. And the average interest rates on car loans with a duration over 3 years rose to 17.2%. This is the highest interest rate for these has been since June 2025, and it's not a good sign that it's happening as the interest rate by the central bank is decreasing. Also, when it comes to commodities, we had a few stories. For metals, the head of the Russian steelmaker Severstal said that metal consumption combined for 2025 and 2024 decreased by 18%. 4% of this occurred in 2024 and 14% in 2025. And for coal, one of the reasons that coal has managed to make sort of a revival, it's not as unprofitable as it used to be, is that the transshipment tariffs for Russian coal in Russian ports decreased by 40% to an average of $17.7 per ton. That's at the high point. At the low point, an average of $10 per ton. And the prices for the Far Eastern ports are as low as $9 per ton in the Taman terminal, which is mostly known as a coal terminal, even though it's been recently the news as an oil terminal. The prices are $12 to $15 per ton, and in Ust-Luga, the prices are $8 per ton. When it comes to interesting data points, I have a few this week. The Russian leasing company Everplan, it was recently acquired by Alpha Bank, as we mentioned in a previous stream. Its new business for 2025 decreased by 56% to just 105.5 billion rubles, and passenger car leasing decreased by 49%. There's again buildup of inventory for Russian leasers, and it's going to repeat probably the same dynamics as they were at the start of 2025 when they started picking up inventory as people returned their cars and other specialized vehicles because they couldn't cover the leasing anymore. When it comes to newsprint consumption in Russia, it decreased by a greater number than in Europe and North America at 17.8% to just 145,000 tons. And newsprint exports also decreased by 13.3% to 705,000 tons. Some news from the Russian gasoline market. The price of gasoline A92 on Spemex on Friday rose by 2.86% to 62,970 rubles per ton. And for A95, gasoline prices increased by 1.62% to 63,370 rubles per ton. Since February the 9th, the increase has been 6.5% for A92 and 5.07% for A95, and this is with the new limiters for the price increases that were introduced last year to reduce the movement in terms of increases in prices for gasoline. I would also point out that this week we had a story from one of the Russian regions that they ran out of diesel fuel for diesel generators and they couldn't be delivered on time. I think it was in Tyumen region. I would probably post it tomorrow on my Twitter account if someone's interested to see another story of Russians going without fuel, something we haven't seen for a while now. And the final interesting data point is that for Valentine's Day, the popular theme gifts that used to be bought, there was a decrease in their purchase by 6 to 8%, and this is due to the desire of Russians to lower their costs in 2026 when compared to previous years, because things are getting harder and harder. When it comes to inflation and debt, for the period of the 3rd of February to the 9th of February, inflation was at 0.13%. This is still a significant number for inflation. I don't think the central bank is correct to say that inflation has slowed down and the peak has been passed, because this is still a high figure. And the inflation for February so far has been 0.2%, and for the year so far, 2.24%, versus 1.5% for the same period in 2025. So right now, 0.7% higher than in 2025 is where we're looking at. And we're halfway to the target of the Russian central bank of 4.5 to 5.5% of inflation for 2026. When it comes to debt, they had two auctions again this week for a total of over 100 billion rubles. In the first auction, they sold 48.5 billion rubles. The yield is interesting. It was 15.32%. So very high above 15 compared to previous auctions. And in the second auction, they managed to sell around 66 billion rubles, and the yield was 15.24%. Again, much higher than 15 than we've seen in previous auctions. And I think this is it for me for this week.
Okay, thank you, Stanimir. There was a few things we could talk about this week, but we don't really think much happened. The Munich Security Conference, I would say, mostly talk. We'll do our best to cover like any structural changes that happen, but I think everyone knows that the U.S. is like moving back from this transatlantic partnership stuff, and Europe is saying needs to be more autonomous strategically and have their own security needs met. And yeah, I think we're going to see some developments there. Oh, right. So Stanimir has to get going. So real quick, we'll cover this question from chat. Stanimir, does this from your report mean that Russian banks and insurers will get more naturalized so they stay alive?
I don't think the segment of insurances for drones was that big that they would need right now to be recapitalized or nationalized or naturalized. I don't think this is the case for now. I think they're probably going to just stop offering that as a product, or they're going to raise premiums even much higher than this and adjust their actuarial calculations. But I think so far it's not hitting them so far that they need to go to their drastic measures.
Okay, thank you, Stanimir. Yeah, so sorry, as I was saying, we'll cover more tangible events that occur, but I think what we saw at Munich was mostly talk, nothing we haven't heard before. So not a whole lot worth covering. The Danish said give Ukraine more missiles, which I thought was pretty cool as usual from Denmark. But anyway, I don't think we need to cover much else at Munich. Erlend, anything you wanted to cover?
Not really. I think a lot of the steam was let out in Davos, and I saw that there was a lot of posting of European officials talking together and announcing that they had good talks together, and also together with U.S. senators, and also Marco Rubio was featured in a lot of those. Hey, we had a good talk with Rubio. Thank you for a great conversation. Prime Minister of Norway, etc. So I think if something interesting happened at the Munich conference, it was probably mostly behind closed doors.
Yeah, I think that's right. So yeah, I don't know. We'll cover more tangible stuff that happens. I think everyone's kind of on the same page about what needs to happen. It's just more at this point, it's a question of political will. It's a question of investment. There's got to be real strategic coordination among the Europeans, and there's got to be money put behind serious military production, as soon as possible, basically. And as long as those two things are met, and I think obviously there was a lot of discussion for the Europeans saying, hey, we're buying American weapons now with our own money. We're clearly the primary stakeholders in this whole security situation with Ukraine, or outside of Ukraine, we're the primary stakeholders. We should have more of a say in these negotiations. Like, why is the U.S. just bypassing us? So Hopefully, as Europe gets more strategic autonomy, that whole equation will shift, and the U.S. will have to recognize to some degree that they can't leave Europe out of this. But I think that's already obvious to anyone paying attention that these U.S. talks are kind of doomed to fail if they can't get Europe on board anyway. And the Russians are explicitly making demands of Europe. So, I mean, the U.S. needs Europe's cooperation. So at this point, it's really on the U.S. to just face reality. But yeah, I don't know. None of this is stuff we haven't heard before. I think you're right. Davos kind of was where a lot of the big energy was spent this year. And yeah, that's a good thing to bring up that this came this week.
Yeah, and I want to note that I think some of the data they published was already quite old when they published it. I think they took 2025 data from sometime in the autumn. I don't want to be too positive about Norway, but they kind of left out around 4 billion US dollars in aid that we provided in this report. I was very surprised to see that because the Kiel Institute has been quite good. But yeah, I obviously don't think Norway is doing enough, but when you report that they're giving 3 point something billion and it's actually 7 point something billion US dollars, then it's kind of bad.
Yeah, I don't know. The Kiel Institute, it's always hard to tell. Like all this stuff, it comes down to sometimes how you count things, when you count them, and all. Is it the EU? Is it the country itself, et cetera, et cetera? There's a lot of I don't know, discrepancies in numbers sometimes, and you don't want to ever I think I don't know, put all your cards on just this type of stuff because it's I don't know, it's one data point among many. But I think the general point, right, we try to do this a lot. We try to visualize data at Tochnyi, right, because there's a lot of data on the internet these days, and the only way you're going to cut through the noise sometimes is to show visuals. And I think this is the point of this visual is pretty obvious, right? The US has clearly bowed out, and it's on Europe now. And so, but I mean, you're right. Hopefully the Kiel Institute will be more accurate to track that stuff, because those numbers are important. And, people do, a lot of policymakers look at what the Kiel Institute does, but I think they did a pretty good job with this infographic. I'd use a darker background personally, but that's just me. No, but I think it's good that they're making an effort to show visualizations like this.
Yeah,
it's helpful.
Yeah, that's also been kind of the weak part of Kiel Institute in the past. You go to their website and it's all like, hey, download this Excel spreadsheet we made.
And a bunch of incomprehensible graphs, and you got to scroll all over the place, and they're all tiny. And yeah, it's good to just have a piece of paper you can hand people and go, hey, look at this. Europe is clearly footing the bill for this now. Shouldn't they have a say in the negotiations?
But yeah, this is, good stuff. It's very well presented.
Yeah, so good on them. Just one other thing, Erlend, I want to talk about real quick, and then we'll discuss the article that was published, which is there was an exercise this week, a military exercise of some kind, or at least there was a report released about it, where it was said that the Ukrainians kind of used their drone stuff on NATO militaries, and didn't go great for NATO militaries.
It's an old. I just want to say it's an old exercise from last year, but the article came out this week.
Okay.
Just to be accurate, so that we don't say anything wrong here.
Yeah, and okay, thank you. But just real quick, my hot take would be, as far as I know, when it comes to military exercises, they usually are doing some crazy stuff to kind of throw the NATO militaries off, to try to get them to deal with the kind of a bad scenario, right? So that it's a good training exercise. So it's never. I see a lot of reports about stuff like that, where it's oh, U.S. Navy destroyed in a week in a military exercise. You know what I mean? Or Iran, would harm the U.S. military in the Gulf if they went there and stuff. So I think you shouldn't take 100% of
like a military exercise to be like 100% accurate. That said, I think it does seem pretty obvious that the Ukrainians are using drones effectively and that NATO still doesn't quite have their head around it. I think that's kind of what I took away from it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in this specific exercise that was in 2025, they had a Ukrainian drone unit operating as what we call OP4, which has been opposing forces. Those OP4 units are normally tailored very much in order to test reactivity and defenses, and also the offensive potential of the actual brigade that is being, or brigade system, or whatever group that you're trying to train, right? Depending on what kind of level the exercise is on. And in this case, apparently 10 operators from the Nemesis drone unit basically destroyed several battalions worth of offensive material. That doesn't mean they destroyed the whole battalion or killed all the, or not killed, but took out in the training terms of things all the soldiers, but they made them effectively inoperable. So that is not something completely new, but what was new in this exercise, I think, is that this drone unit was able to operate quite freely, which is probably not the case in many exercises due to very slow adaptation when it comes to how to operate drones safely in an exercise environment. And that's been one of the big limitations on many Western armies, is that there are so many regulations on how you can fly drones that it's effectively impossible to realistically try out a scenario where there is an opposing force with small drones, FPV drones, and bomber drones.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to frame it, right? Is that just like NATO military doctrine still hasn't quite grasped the idea of small units with drones acting with agility and without all this interference. And it's a huge problem. I don't want to undersell the size of the problem. You got all kinds of stuff flying around in the air. You got units that need to communicate with each other, and you have to do all that perfectly. And I don't know, it's a huge issue, but yeah, I think that's kind of the takeaway I took from it, because the headlines were oh, the Ukrainians just completely destroyed the NATO military, and drones are everything and it's all over, folks. But if we just maybe don't go that far, we can at least say that I think NATO militaries are still having a little bit of trouble wrapping their heads around this idea of what Erlend was talking about, a small, light, agile drone unit that moves around and does the normal infantry grunt work, something like that. Cool. Anything else we want to say about that before we talk about the new article that was published?
Well, I think that this specific case that was talked about in the media, I think it was maybe the Wall Street Journal, is being talked about just because of that. It was published a comment about it in the Wall Street Journal. There are several countries that do extensive collaborations with Ukrainian units in order to learn about drone warfare. And I would be surprised if we haven't had similar results in exercises in the West with Ukrainian operators or actual maybe even NATO personnel that has been trained on drone warfare by Ukrainians. The reason why we hear about it is because an article was published.
Yeah, so I think that's a good summation of the two main items of discussion this week: Munich and that article that we just mentioned. So, up next, we are going to discuss an article that was recently published from contributor Daniele. This is a huge topic, a lot of great work done, a lot of quantitative research. I don't know, I report on these strikes every week, but if you asked me to quantify any of it, I couldn't do that. So, I think this is a good opportunity to take a look at all of the individual strikes that we discuss every week on the show in aggregate and kind of what they say about the whole situation. I think we'll turn it over to Daniele. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, and
Welcome, Daniel.
thank you. Yeah, after a long time, much overdue. So, yes, this article essentially has been the results of a very long research, which has been undertaken not only by myself, but of course other people that have been tracking all these events and creating a very big database with all this data. And just a second.
I hope we get Daniela back soon. In the meantime,
I'm back.
okay, good.
I had a problem with my microphone. Essentially, it started to make a strange noise in my headphones, so I had to kind of unplug and plug back. Sorry. So yes, this has been a very long research that has been undertaken by essentially a small team, 3 people mainly, and we collected as much data as possible during. We started essentially we started in early June, unfortunately, to doing this very much in a systematic way, and we still collecting data. But the research that's being published is based on data that's essentially started to be collected around June and ended up. I decided to stop and start to write in October. So essentially, things that happen after the end of October have not been captured. Now, the nature of the research essentially has been, first of all, collecting the data, then analyzing the strikes and verifying as many as possible, and also create not only a map, but also give to the reader the possibility to go across the map and and also look at the data. So on the website at the very end, there is a very nice interactive map which can be navigated by the user, and essentially, as soon as you start to add different layers, you will see the scale of the amount of data. To give you an idea, the entire database at the moment has more than 762 data point, each of which has its own marking, is geolocated from us or from other sources, and as you can see, gives you some information about the nature of the target, as a bit of description, and also the sources. Now, I know that a lot of channels have been closing, so this might be a problem in the future, but we tried our best also for our research to have as many sources as possible, like 3 or more, and this allowed us also to go back on the on the database and analyze every single strikes. Now, I want to say something important, that these strikes are missile drone, FPV drone, long range drone, FPV drone, but also sabotage. Especially some class of target like a railroad or railways essentially have been plagued by sabotage, especially in Crimea and in mostly in occupied Ukraine. And as you can see, there are strikes and also act of sabotage quite far away from some areas. And we also tried to collect some dubious events, like some accident that we were suspicious about the origin, to try to give an overview. of the events. But yes, thank you for showing this image. This image essentially shows us the kinetic operation in Russia and occupied Ukrainian territories between the 5th of June and the 15th of October 2025. And you can see that there are areas that are with much higher intensity, in particularly Crimea, the region of Belgorod, and but as you can see, most of Western Russia and the occupied territories of Ukraine have been subjected to a very intense level of activities. And as you can have seen from the map, a very large number of targets have been attacked. Now, the research wanted to answer a few questions. First of all, if there was any correlation or any pattern in this attack, and in particular, in the article, I make a parallel with the Second World War campaign, Allied campaign on Germany, in particular the need of a four-engine bomber and the fact that a certain technology enabled essentially the Allies to strike directly in Nazi Germany, but essentially on the home front. And essentially what we have seen is that aside the strikes in the occupied territories, a lot of strikes has been done in Russia, and they aimed the home front. So all those network of facilities that enable the war effort also indirectly. And the first target that we started to investigate, of course, at the time, Stanimir was doing an incredible job on tracking fuel shortages. So we were saying, okay, let's look at what type of target have been hit most in the domain of oil refineries, oil facility in general, which means transportation, and also fuel station, because there was a period where FPV drone and long-range drone were striking also fuel station, normal gas station along the border. And as you can see in this graph, we have been able to kind of look at this data. Of course, these are all the strikes that we have been aware of. Probably there are more. For sure, there are no duplicates, because essentially it's very easy to geolocate and determine these results. And in this category about oil infrastructure, you can see 198 strikes. You may say, why, Daniele, you are counting also air defense? Now, I don't want you to go back and forth with the map, but if you start to look at the map and you start to look only on air defense, Ukraine has been working very hard on trying to hit all air defense asset, from short, medium range anti-air missile system to radar, but also all those network of depot that had ammunition inside, rockets, gas, fuel for the actual self-propelled anti-air defense systems. So all these targets have been, as you can see, hit in conjunction with the strikes along oil infrastructure. Now, this of course played a very good picture, because essentially we were able to see also the location of these strikes, and we have seen that all the front line, even quite close to the front line, the Ukrainians have been hitting targets like Buk or S-300, even S-400 in the rear, in a very systematic way. Also in Crimea, sometime with sabotage action, but mostly with snakes with drones. And if you go through the different slide, just to allow you to understand, there are some slides with this is the cumulative oil infrastructure strike. So these essentially tell us the amount of strike against time, but in a cumulative way. And you can see that there is an increase with all the categories together from the end of March, essentially. The end of July, it start to increase significantly. Now, all oil depot, of course, are the target that have been mostly hit, but they do not represent immediately a capability of producing, but mostly of storing. And this is very important because oil depot do not only act as a depot for or a storage facility for finished product, but also for the oil that needs to be processed. Why this is important? This is important because you cannot produce more oil than the oil that you can process. For this reason, you have the depot, because you start to if you overproduce or you want to produce more, you have a certain amount of depot, and you can start to store oil that then will be refined. But if you start to take down systematically a large amount of this depot, you start to create a problem, which we start to see just now. Today, a Ukrainian analyst shared the quota of produced oil, and for the first time, we can see a drastic drop in production of oil. Now, this is not only due to these strikes, but as I always say, we need to think in a more systematic way. The oil depot represent a tool that allows you to keep up with the production of oil, even if you don't have enough refining capability. And we know that the refining capability at the moment, despite the strikes, is still not untouched, but not as severely damaged. Then there is the oil price. So all these things together act in a certain way, and we can see that the Ukrainians have been very focused in striking this particular type of target, sometime in a very successful way. There is one of the slides that I prepared show you a strike on an oil refinery, but in that case, the main target wasn't the refinery itself, but was the depot. So this is the strikes on a Russian fuel station. You can see the aftermath of a very large fire. But if you keep going, I think at a certain point you will see the slide. See, this is another strike on a fuel station. If you keep going, you will find these are strikes on air defense system. We tracked as many as possible here. Oh, this one. This one is one of the most successful strikes because it took out a large number of oil depot. Now, you have to understand that, unfortunately, verifying in such, this was a very luck shot, because essentially the day after the strike, Sentinel did this picture, which is amazing. You can see the 20 and the 22nd, the strike happened on the 21st. How luck and how lucky we were. So, but this is not always possible. So also on our side has been a very difficult always to verify everything, because sometimes even if you have videos of fire, then when you look at the images, or you have essentially a cloudy sky, or in some cases you simply do not have any evidence, any significant evidence of damage occurred. So this is why many people tend to be skeptics about the efficacy of these strikes. But I think the main reason is because as human nature, we want to see the effect. And after we see the flames of the strikes, for example, there is probably another slide after this one that I always take as an example. I don't know if you can, yeah, that one. This one essentially has shown a very large fire, probably even explosion, but from the images, you can't see much, despite we know that has been damaged. So sometimes it's very hard, even from, and this is Maxer, it's not Sentinel, I made a mistake here in this image. You can always see the damage as clear. Now, if you start to go on the next 13 and 14, the next two slide, you will see some example of strikes on depot. And here, even if Sentinel is low resolution, in false color, you can see very clearly the effect of what has been hit. In this case, directly the refinery. So Are these strikes successful? It depends from how you depict the success on an operation like this. In my opinion, these strikes on oil infrastructure, for example, they have been part of a larger plan, not only focused on oil refineries, but also starting to hit the shadow fleet, and also trying to uh, instill the fear of a war that is approaching to the home front. And this is very important because create political pressure, create the necessity of the Kremlin to respond somehow. Maybe placing nets everywhere, starting to move air defense. And so, as much as you start to do all these things, you make mistake, you become more observable, and therefore you can become an easier target. And we know that Ukraine has been very diligent in striking a radar and air defense system. So, in my opinion, this entire campaign have been very effective, in particular in a moment where Russia was looking to be like on the advance, but in reality has been hit very hard in the rear. And if you go on slide 4, you will see even something more interesting. I know that I'm putting you up and down through the presentation, but I want to show you that slide. This data is new. It's very new. Just out, it's not even in the article. This is the effect of the strikes and also the sabotage effect on Russian railway system. You can see that these have been very intense and also in kind of concert with all the other strikes for oil, but also other classes of target. So we can see that this was planned. Now, many people are asking why this is decaying, why in September less, in October less, and then slowly looks like it's disappearing. There are different reasons. One could be the weather, despite I think weather is only partially an answer because we see Shahed hitting Ukraine in full scale. So why Ukraine is not replying in kind? Some may argue that Ukraine do not have enough drones to do these strikes, but I doubt that. I think again, we always think that something like an aerial campaign should be performed continuously. But I think this is a wrong way of thinking about this type of mission because you don't want your enemy to be, you know, um, to know that you are coming every night. And I know that many could see this, but Ukraine has been hit every night. But yes, but Ukraine every night learn something and improve because unfortunately they have to practice air defense and they know what to expect. The Russians are, of course, also targeting military object, objectives, but they have demonstrated to have a very poor planning. They have been hitting some targets very well, even if we don't exactly always know about this for obvious reason. But their aerial campaign are based on another type of doctrine that is more oriented on demoralizing the population and also its allies. And this is something that we have done during World War II as well by carpet bombing Nazi Germany, which didn't work at the beginning until we redirected all our effort on the industrial um, sector. And many argued along in many books that I read recently that this wasn't very much working, but many others argue the fact that by hitting in this way, it's true, the Allied forces never destroyed completely the industry of Nazi Germany, but they impeded its further development and created a level of attrition in spare parts, in lubricant, consumables, that then dragged the Germans into troubles. And I think this is the philosophy behind this type of strikes. Ukraine do not want to completely, maybe they want, but this is not their real objective. Their real objective is to try to attain as much areas of Russian economy in order to, at the very least, make them less effective in producing ammunition, in producing rockets, in producing whatever they can do. And we know, and we all know that Russia is preparing for another war because we have seen expansion of their defense industry on a significant scale. So this is why I think these strikes are very much aimed in certain period, in certain occasion. And also there is the possibility that strategic, operational, and strategic and tactical theater in this summer kind of found, a contact point. Tactically, the Russians were advancing; they were creating a problem, even if this happened at the very small increment of occupied territories at the cost of a large amount of manpower. Politically, we had what we had with the United States, and strategically, they want to try to deter further aggression, and so they wanted to try to win in a way that they can attire also the Russian industry. So, and all these things maybe in these 3 months between July and September coincided because all these things were kind of merging together. And so they say, okay, launch this offensive because this was literally an aerial campaign by drone and missile, and of course some act of sabotage. Yeah, and it's it. I mean, the article essentially goes along all these points, and just to give you, this is something else that I wanted to bring today. Now, why all these strikes are important, and why it's so important to hit Russia where it matters? Because Russia, meanwhile, we talk, continue to rearm, but also continue to expand its own industry, in particular for LNG. Now, this happened to be a side project that I had. I started to track the development of one of their largest shipyard that produce these very large barges for the extraction, processing, and transfer of liquefied natural gas. And these shipyard in Belokomenka is just above the Arctic Circle, and of course is very far away from where we currently are, but has seen a constant and relentless expansion. And all facilities like these are critically important to become a target. Why? Because think about that: 60% is owned by Russia, but the rest is owned by other companies, in particular 20% from China. So all these sites can produce and can make Russia a problem if this war ends with, for example, a ceasefire that doesn't punish an aggressor, because they will be again using fossil fuel and our dependency on these to try to gain again money, to try to enter into the market and trying to again rearm themselves for a second round if these will be allowed to them. So this is just an example of how the Russians consider this war not only with Ukraine but with Europe as an existential war, because they need to expand, because they have this imperialistic need of expansion. And just for another, if you go at the last slide, the next one, this shows us Electrostal, which has been covered, no, Electrostal, sorry, the Red October plant. And this is a forging plant, has been, next there is a Titan Barricadi. These are very large forging companies. These are documents of the new building, the new forging workshop, where they will have 2 very large presses and a significant amount of furnaces and quenching vasks. So they will be able to manufacture very large component, including defense component. And why this is important? Because during the the investigation that we have done more than a year ago, we discovered that pretty much Red October own Titan Barricadi, which is a very large defense contractor, and they often has shipped material to Titan Barricadi, Sukhoi, and so on. So this is just an example. If you go back to that slide, you can see the development of these forging house despite the sanction, despite the war. And this is like I'm becoming a broken disc, but there are so many signs that Russia is not going to stop. Instead, is going to double down on what they have done, because there is, for them, is existential, and the population. Maybe the price is going to be a problem, but as soon as they can say that the problem is NATO, the problem is the West, they will continue to allow this to happen. And I think for today, I finished. Sorry for the monologue. If there is any question.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go back to the first slide. This is an excellent research. It's taken a lot of time, Daniele. What do you see as possible improvements in efficiency and also range capability for Ukraine that is viable? Not, some pipe dream about tomahawks, but something more realistic.
Oh yeah. Okay. So there is a very important point, and this is something that I always stressed about, even in other work that we have done, published and unpublished. One of the issue of all this, of all the strikes, is, I mean, in general, the audience have to understand that there is no magic weapon. Physics matter. So if you want to reach 3,000 kilometers, you can do it, and you can do some damage. But the amount of warhead and the speed that you have, it will be limited. So this means that even if you manage to arrive, let's say, a couple of drones, 3 drones, 4 drones, you may not be able to produce significant damage, especially if you are hitting a refinery or a very large cement plant, because surprise, surprise, you need the cement as well. And this has been targeted as well, so in some cases. Now, if you use a long-range drone, unfortunately, at the moment, you have a range, but you don't have a leading capability. Now, there are some cases where around 1,000, 1,500 kilometers, you can have those essentially small airplane with a FAB 200, 250, if I remember. So you can still have a very large explosion, but there is the other side of the problem. You are slow, you are much larger, you are noisy. The chance of being intercepted are quite substantial. Of course, there is no pilot, so it's not a big deal. But still, you will need several of them to be able to go through. Now, we have seen that Russia is struggling in a desperate way to deter this. And you can see where is Moscow. There is essentially an area where there are nearly no target. You have to zoom, of course. But the point is it's quite difficult for Ukraine to hit hardened target. And this is where missiles are much stronger, both cruise or ballistic. But they are much complex system. They require more investment, and of course they require support. So what Ukraine is doing at the moment is increasing their own production of everything at the moment, but they are also investing in Neptune. There is this also Flamingo. Now this cruise missile, essentially, because it's a cruise missile, I didn't have done a very great job, despite some account have accredited this missile some kind of very accurate precision. We know that he has some problem. Can they solve it? Potentially yes, hopefully yes. And if they solve, of course, with a drone, with some cruise missile like Flamingo, which has a very high capability in bringing up a big warhead, Neptune, and also potentially future Storm Shadow, um, these could help and definitely will help. Of course, if we can give Ukraine a much higher capability missile, like you say, the Tomahawk, this would be fantastic, but we need to see the reality. This is not going to occur. So the only possibility is to strengthen Ukrainian industry and allow them, for example, to develop Gromchu. So all these native solutions that Ukraine will be able to produce and use at their discretion. And of course, the weapon that we can provide will become, something like an advantage, like because Storm Shadow is an advantage because it's a very good missile, has very good guidance, has very low observability, so can do a lot, but has a limited range, probably maximum 500 kilometers in the best case scenario. So it's not going to hit everywhere in Russia as you can do with a drone. So yeah, I think the solution is not pointing on a single weapon, and they are doing all the homework have been done because I see development occurring. Of course, we would like to see these occurring faster, but these also have limitation.
Yeah. So obviously, Ukraine needs more missile capabilities, and there are some developments happening abroad and domestically. Do you have
Yes.
any big hopes for some of the missiles that may be delivered? In the sense, do you think that there's going to be more Storm Shadows available for Ukraine? And are there any other cruise missiles, ballistic missiles that Ukraine may
Mhm,
receive?
mhm. There are a good project, for example, some UK-led project for Nightfall and another project for drone slash, and John will hate me, cruise missile. Sorry, John. But these, if they occur, and I think they will occur because we need them, they will be not something that will happen very soon. For Storm Shadow, I'm quite optimistic because there are two lines, and the UK and the France line are okay. There have been a lot of rumors, a lot of people spoke without knowing things, but even by investigating things. Um, but I think Storm Shadow probably is the best thing that we can offer at the moment, unless Taurus would be on the table. But um, to be fair and realistic, I think if we can start to produce more Storm Shadow for everyone, literally everyone, even other countries, would be just better. I know about other companies like, this particular missile has been Kronsberg bought this, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, Kongsberg bought the company that develops the Rusty Dagger, and I hope that the Kongsberg acquisition may be a sign that we're going to see quite a reliable output for Ukraine. This missile was more or less developed for Ukraine. It's a US company, though.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, there was a lot of also Colby made a post, which I don't agree, but I understand his point regarding the fact that but Kronsberg have done this very good deal. We have a missile has been tested. Why we don't all for cruise of these because also the price tag is much lower than Storm Shadow. Why we don't go on that instead of developing a new in 6 countries together? Now, technically, he's right. I think he's completely right because this has been tested. The company has done the diligence work. So why doing this? The main problem is that you want to acquire the capability of having a weapon that you design, you know how to design, you know how to further design. We don't have this capability on this scale, and also we don't have an industry that is capable of working with object that gives you a much smaller return of investment per piece. Okay, it's not cheap, but it's much cheaper than many other missiles and offer very good capabilities. But I think that there is a need for us to have our industries working in Europe in order to be able to deliver such system and not just buy the solution from US. So on one side, I agree with him. It's technically it's much easier. You have it. You bought the license. You just produce. But at the same time, you haven't done all the research and all the development. So I don't know. It's always good to have this capability of doing something on your own. Now, he was also pointing at the fact that Six Nations is a lot. I agree. But there is also Poland inside. So I'm quite. There are a lot of nations that want that type of missile ready. So it's not. I'm not completely against it. But yeah, this would be amazing. A little bit like the Hammer guided bomb from France, which has been successful. It's one of the few things that France with Caesar, which has been produced at the decent rate, not great, not terrible, decent. And yeah, we need more of these things.
Yep. There were some questions in chat, but there's been a lot of discussion since. Let me see.
I can hit one that's like super early on. I think it's pretty quick, which is Thierry mentioned. A directed energy system engaged at a ballistic missile can't have a 3-kilometer range. 3 kilometers is covered in 0.9 seconds at Mach 10. And the missiles, the directed energy weapon, we need time to actually destroy a warhead in a missile. I agree with that. I don't know. I don't see how the Trizube could be an anti-ballistic system, but I guess as at some point either the media or the Ukrainians claim that potentially it's being used. But I think primarily the directed energy weapons are going to be attempted to be used against drones. I think that's
cruise
general idea.
And cruise missile.
Yeah, and potentially cruise missiles as well.
Could be a terminology error. This was, I guess, a comment to the news report. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with the reasoning. Is all I wanted to say.
Okay. Next question. Just my profile name. At current scale of attacks, wouldn't the gap between needed air defense capabilities and actual present systems be even larger for almost all other European countries compared to Ukraine? Not sure exactly what the comment was about or question was referred to, but Daniele,
I have a very strong. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a very strong answer. Kill the
Yes.
archer.
Yeah.
You will never, especially with the drones, you will never be able to deter on a saturation attack. There is no way you can produce as many interceptors as it's impossible. Now, and also economically a disaster, because a company can always, sorry, a nation, a belligerent nation can keep producing a cheap drone, and you will keep taking them down. Now you can say, oh, but I use only cheap solution to hit the cheap target. Yes, but the airspace is becoming crowded nowadays. So it's very difficult for the air defense system to exactly cover everything with the maximum efficiency. And when you are lacking resources, as Ukraine, unfortunately, but we would be probably in the worst case, you cannot always do the best choice. So to reply, you need to identify where this missile or drone are launched and blast them. There is no other way, and this is what we would have done if we were in similar situation. This is why I always, and I think Erlend, you are telling this as well many times. Europe needs missile, not only air defense missile, but also attack missile like Rassi Dagger, ballistic missile, even IRBM if necessary, with the conventional warhead, of course, because if something happens, factories, barracks, airport, we need to blast them, because otherwise this will drag on and we will finish our interceptor just in a few weeks, if not days. So Ukraine didn't have this opportunity because they didn't have the kit, they didn't have right support at the beginning. You remember when there was this prohibition of hitting with the Western weapon in Russia? Well, that helped a lot the Russians. So you don't need we need more. I agree with you. We need a very diversified and kind of onion shell approach. You can't have all Patriot or all SAMPTI. But we need also means to identify where the issue is and destroy it.
Yeah. Totally agree. Next question. From Svidgen, not sure exactly how that's pronounced, but through improved capabilities with distance and precision, any measurable movement towards Moscow, and next comment says of strikes. I mean, so that it's obviously about Ukraine's capability of hitting Moscow.
Yeah, I mean, Moscow is a funny thing. I mean, funny. You don't have the map here with the facilities of Russia, but you may found on the website somewhere. No, because this one is the target that has been hit. We have been mapping also air defense, and Russia and Moscow is surrounded by air defense system. Now, you may say, oh, but S-300, S-400 are not that great. Yes, but still a lot of air defense. So yeah, but here I don't think you have that. Do you? No, you don't. Yeah, because it's on my secret map. You know, Pigeon, on the evening I go on Russia and look at target. Anyway, around the perimeter there are, which is very large as you can see. Yeah, that one exactly. There are different rings of S-300, S-400, and also short range, medium range, and air defense system. So, and radar, a lot of radar. So it's very difficult to overcome that level of air defense. And the point is, why you would on earth go in a region or on Moscow where there is not much? There are some targets there, but there is not really much unless you want to bomb the Kremlin. But what the purpose aside giving Putin other reason to move more propaganda? I think there is no benefit in that unless you want to hit some kind of design bureau. There is the GSE, I think GSE, no Proton. There is one that makes Iskander there, if you want. But apart from few of these targets, there are some targets around Moscow. There is a very large ammunition production facility far away, but probably in range of the air defense system. In fact, has not been attacked. You really, yeah, I don't think Ukraine is going to waste anything unless there is something that they really need to hit there. And also, I mean, at the moment with Trump and all these things, it's very delicate situation. I would have no problem if they decide to strike in Moscow, but I don't think there will be any benefit on a tactical level and a political operational level, because I can imagine Trump making an issue of that because Putin phone him and say, oh, they bomb Moscow, now I have to retaliate, which he bombs Kyiv every day, every night. So, I mean, it's not a very big difference. But yeah, I don't think there would be much benefit in doing that, unless there is something that we don't know and they want to hit. Also, because think about that. If they want to kill a general in Moscow, they have done that twice, I think. So if they want to reach a people, they don't need a drone. The the Ukrainian secret services can work pretty not easily, but they can do what they need. So why attacking with drones? You know.
Yep. I'm not sure if there were any more questions directly to Daniele, but the chat was definitely discussing a lot of things. Joseph, do you have any questions for Daniele?
Yeah, I guess there was this week a strike that was reported to be the longest range, which was 1,700 kilometers. Is that accurate? I mean, in terms of I assume there have been strikes, like putting aside spiderweb and things like that. Is that accurate that it's like a long range strike from Ukraine? Is that the longest?
If it's not the longest, it's one of the longest that I heard. I think, yeah, I mean, probably is the longest that I'm aware, but there are others very close to that. And again, you have to understand that Russia, after the western part of Russia, do not have that extensive air defense system, because most of the threat, I mean, in their view, most of the threat could come from NATO, from China, in theory. So in eastern Russia, you have air defense system, western Russia, and then probably you have some radar and installation, mostly from the USSR period in the north, because of the you know the Arctic Pole, and then the strikes from there with the ICBM. So they have some, but this type of radar and this type of stuff is not designed to see and to help you with the small drones. So it's once they pass the western part of Russia, it's kind of an highway. But of course, they can still be intercepted by small air defense systems that are present. And of course, they can get jammed. I mean, we see maybe a few drone arrives, even one, but you don't know how many departed in order to allow these. And also, these type of operation are complex because often it's not just a drone that goes in one target. They try to confuse air defense system. They try to evade the air defense system.
Okay. I don't know. I guess the only other thing maybe worth mentioning is this week Zelensky did say that he didn't feel that Russia got serious about negotiations, and it seems that would be maybe an indication that the negotiations in Abu Dhabi were more productive than the Ukrainians had felt than the previous ones were. But he basically said that the Russians weren't taking them seriously until Ukraine started successfully striking deep into Russia. And I think that's true. I don't know, it just reminds me a long time ago of something Constantine said, which is it's like this is very early on in the full scale invasion. He just said, right now it's like we're in a boxing match, but all we can do is block. We can't punch back, right?
Yeah.
So this is a huge development for Ukraine, the ability to strategically strike inside Russia. It's, I would say, increasingly becoming the main, like the president of Ukraine spent a long time talking about this issue in terms of like he didn't focus mostly on the front line. I would say he focused mostly on this issue of strategic strikes on both sides. So it's like a, I don't know, huge topic, deserves probably more attention than the media gives it. Might be I would say probably will be the decisive factor in deciding the whole thing, but maybe that's overstating the case a bit. But as someone who's followed the strikes kind of in granularly or one as they come. It's been pretty humbling to watch Ukraine overcome all of the problems that they had and actually get a program in place that can strike Russia strategically.
Yeah, and I think is if things will continue even for an year, I think this is the way to go, because the way now they are trying to fight on the front line is trying to remove as much as possible the human cost. So they want to save forces for different reasons. Use as many drones as possible in order to limit their attrition, also the fatigue that the troops have to overcome because of all the problem and necessities that they have. And attacking on the rear at that level of depth allows them to destroy, or at least limit the support that the industry can give to the war effort, the Russian war effort. And all these things combined are a lot of punch on the lever, but they still have to give the final one. I don't think Russia will need only one. Probably there will be a few. And for example, there was a strike recently. We don't know if it was successful on the 117th ammo depot. So one of the things that I think Ukraine have to do is to destroy, or at least severely damage all the few newest ammo depot in 500 kilometer range that Russia still have. Murmansk probably is too far away, it's too complex, but there are at least another 2 or 3. I think I call them level 3 because they essentially are very new or completely refurbished post 2010 ammo depot. That those should go. Those should be the focus of our next campaign. Because why this? Not because they are new, but because these are the staging areas where Russia probably store most of the ammunition before going closer and closer to the front line. And we know that they have been dispersing these supplies since HIMARS become a thing. So the destruction of these ammo depot will oblige the Russian forces to use much lower security and much older depot, which can be hit also by simple small drones rather than missile. And if you start to limit so much the capability of bringing ammunition to the front line, that things will start to bite slowly. So yeah, this is a very armchair general. I don't like to do these things, but this is something that I was thinking since I started to work on ammo depot, because the Ukraine have done a brilliant job in destroying or severely damaging many good ammo depot. If they can keep going, I think for Russia becomes harder and harder on that side. Plus all the sabotage and the partisan activity that is hampering the railway system across the entire occupied region. So just for the listener, do not believe for 1 minute that who is living right now in occupied territory is because it stays there because it's okay with the Russian. There are so many partisans working also in Crimea.
So this question was referred to the Iran program missile, the Rusty Dagger from Zone 5. And you said American made, so it's ITAR again. The thing is with this missile is that there is already a foreign military sale approved, I think for a total of 3,350 units. And I found this article on Militarny from this autumn. And the thing is, this is supposedly the time frame which it was planned originally. And the ERAM prototype was supposed to be finished by Q4 in 2025. It was tested just recently, so a little bit delayed, and the production should have been started already in 2025. So if we look at this timeframes, and you push it a couple of months ahead or a quarter ahead, we should expect production of the missile to start relatively soon from now. And this is a foreign military sale to Ukraine that has already been approved, and I would expect some of the funds available to Ukraine through the loan program through the EU will be used to acquire these missiles.
If I can add just one thing, I think the concern for the ITAR should also think about the fact that at the moment we do not have anything in Europe in this category. So if we can buy time by buying a US, why not? In the meantime, this could be also a good example of what works and could also benefit the actual program that is just starting in Europe right now.
Yeah. And also the good thing about this missile in particular is that, as far as I know, it's not supposed to go, like there's no US military unit that is buying this missile currently. It's specifically made for Ukraine.
Yeah, they have their own JSAM and all the other. I mean, they already have this type of missile. I don't see. Also for there was a Barracuda. Yeah, one of those other kind of low cost cruise missile that's still not been purchased by the US Army. So who knows how it will go.
And then there's a lot of chatter now.
I think we have at least one more question, Erlend.
Yeah,
That's
this one.
Yeah.
So, question for Daniele. Do you think Flamingo once okay would be the good missile to raise the LNG terminals of the Baltic Sea and even the Yamal and LNG or Arctic LNG too? Thierry sent this question.
Well, if we have to dream, I say yes, because it has a good warhead. The problem is the navigation and the guidance and the CEP. Now, it's true that that thing is so big that, I mean, even if it has a CEP of 50 meters, it's fine. But still, at the moment, I didn't see any confirmation of its efficacy. We know that the few missile strikes that have been confirmed to be fully with Ukrainian weapon were Neptune, and they were precise. So they have the ability to do these things, but these are two different companies. Now, is FP1, I think, is a good drone, for example, the smaller one. Why this is becoming so difficult? I have a true opinion on that. First of all, is that it's a completely different scale, is larger missiles, and also because they are trying to adopt a concept and a type of missile that has a lot of issues itself in aerodynamics. So it's very difficult to get all these things right if you never have done this before and you're doing this on a very complex configuration, because they have this air breathing engine on the top. They have a very bulky mass. They went straight up to a very large missile. When you develop a missile, which you never have done before, or at least at this scale, you get all the problem. Now, for example, imagine if Elon Musk started to develop a Starship without having done anything about before. I will be a disaster since day one, because you don't have all this experience. So my feeling is that on that side, they have a lack of experience. But if fundings are there and they can keep improving, I don't see why they cannot succeed. Hopefully, yes.
I mean, 50 meters of CEP would be fantastic compared to the current results of the.
How much was the last one?
I don't know. The last one, there's not really any confirmed evidence of.
That arrive on target.
I
Oh,
don't
jeez.
know if it arrived even inside the base, but
Yeah.
maybe there's some slight indication that maybe something happened inside the ammo depot.
Someone drop a cigarette. No, but yes, that's my point. If they can get essentially this thing right, there is no reason why they shouldn't get procurement. The problem is that that missile is gigantic, and I've seen the stuff that they've done, which also work. They never have done something like that. So my feeling as a engineer, let's say, is that they overstretched what they can do because probably they had some know-how, some parts, some ideas. But from flying a missile and allowing the missile to go where you want, there is a very big amount of work in the middle. But I trust them. I hope that they can do that because it's not overall a bad missile.
I don't know.
Just for the audience, real quick.
I mean,
CP
in the absence
is
of
like
anything
50
else,
that it can hit. So 50 meters means if you try to point it at a spot with somewhere within 50 meters, it will land. Sorry, go ahead, guys.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say again that we don't really have enough evidence to measure, from an OSINT perspective, the CEP, but from what we've seen, it doesn't seem to be very effective. And sometimes the first strike, we could demonstrably see that the CEP, so the accuracy was much more than 50 meters. I think at least one or two of the missiles landed more than 100 meters from the target.
yeah, which is bad.
Yeah.
I mean, bad for our standard. If you look at not the very recent, but the Soviet era missile or the more the less recent. I mean, the area of the CP of some Russian missile was that. But yeah, I mean, I think they want. There is also another important point to make here. When you are hitting with how much is 1,000 kilograms, how much is the warhead of the flammable? It's very big. You hit something. You want to be precise because the least things that Ukraine wants is one of these things hitting a flat, and not because they always try their best to hit a military target and cause the least of even when they hit that command center in Kursk. I remember that was epic. They used Storm Shadow, and you can see people looking at the missile striking, and not even glasses from the window were destroyed because the Storm Shadow is a damn good missile. So I think you cannot just say, okay, just produce and then whatever happen, who cares? They have to care because they wanted to hit the target for several reasons, and they don't want to hit other things because of other reasons. I don't know if Firepoint will be able to fix this issue. I hope so, but who knows?
Yeah. For now, at least, Firepoint has much more success with the FP2 drone, it seems. But it's a completely different weapon.
Yeah. I mean, with it's completely different flight dynamics. The forces involved, the times. I mean, it's completely different.
Yeah. I guess that was it. But before we end it, I kind of wanted to touch on a topic that is far away from long range strike. There's been a lot of rumors and talk about a counter offensive happening in the area between Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia. So in the border between Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia in the southern frontline area, more specifically northeast of Hulia Pole. you will see a lot of maps and posts about this in social media, but we have so Andrew has not updated his map, and that's for a very specific reason. There's just not enough evidence out there to basically determine if there has been any change in territory or not. And if you go back in the days, actually during the last couple of weeks, there are very few geolocated strikes in this specific area of the front line. And that's because there is a very high degree of operational security, and communication is very tight from the units involved in this area of the front line. And that is probably a good indicator that something is happening. We've looked at satellite imagery. We can see there's a lot of artillery activity happening in this area. But other than that, I don't think we should comment much more on it because we just don't have enough information available. Daniele, we've been watching it. We've been looking at this together. What do you think?
This map is not very professional. Not too many arrows. I'm joking, of course. Yeah, no, I mean I love when Ukrainians start to do an offensive, because Twitter or X, whatever you call it, start to become populated of maps with arrow in every direction. At some point, essentially, the entire front line is covered with arrows. Okay, they are advancing somewhere. No, yes, I agree. Luckily, the snow allows very well to see also the direction of some artillery strikes, and some we have been. I mean, you showed me this first view. I was concentrated on the articles. I was a bit detached from what was happening on the front line, but what was surprisingly was the continuing increase of craters even further away from where you can see now the front line, on Andrew's map, and this was quite a chilling. We had also we went on Sentinel. We use the synthetic aperture radar, so the SAR images, and you can see all those tree lines always black with no activity. At certain point they start to flash. So this and this is not a kind of an artifact, because it's very triggered when this type of crater start to appear. It looks like a small small creatures start to move everywhere, and essentially it does signal activity. We don't know what, of course, but it means that stuff is moving, is reflecting. So we know that there have been also, I think today there was the news about probably also tank involved. So it is a real offensive. It's too early to say anything, of course. I have all the best hope, and I think what is good in this case is a good signal is the fact that also the Russians are kind of blinded at this moment, because they lost Starlink. And I think it was you, Erlend, that you say, oh, it might be not a coincidence that as soon as they lost Starlink, these offensives start to build up. And this also reflected a bit in comments that I read around on Telegram, on Russian channel, because they feel themselves blind at the moment. So my main concern is why we haven't obliged Moscow to remove these 2 years ago from Russia, because that would be so important. Anyway, yeah, these are the strikes. You can see how they concentrate in certain areas, and yes, if you go like this, you can see very well. You can also see in some cases the direction of the strike, because the shell enter with a certain angle, probably a grad, and leaves a mark giving you the direction, which is south, west, or south. So this means that these are Russian shooting at things. Now, this is very far away from where the front line at the moment should be.
I just want to say that some of these strikes are Ukrainian and some of them are Russian.
I think you shown something on the snow before that has like a plume coming.
Yeah, you can see here this strike, or many of these strikes have like a dust being sent up in the air, and that dust is going in the opposite direction from where
From the
they
camp.
are. Yeah, so this one is coming from the north, probably indicate that it's Ukrainian. Same here, northwest is northeast, etc. But personally, I think it's too much to kind of analyze right now
It's very difficult, yeah.
what happens, also because this can be, you know, accumulated over days. But you can clearly see that there is very high activity going on in some of these areas, especially around Beresove and Ternove,
Mhm.
and in the axis um, here from Slagoda down towards Pavlivka. There is quite a lot of artillery activity along some of the tree lines, and you can see that they concentrate around the tree lines. Yeah.
And just to conclude, we can say that if the Ukrainians are pushing, they cannot stop in the open field. They will need to reach a settlement to start to consolidate their position. So there's still a long way before they can essentially say, okay, we have taken ground. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. And also, again, we don't have enough evidence to show any presence or anything. So it's still early.
Finger crossed.
Yeah. But yeah, just be cautious about maps that you see about offensive and changes in territory, because there is really no evidence that can through open sources that can determine where the Ukrainians are or where they're not, etc.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we discussed is that many people would think, oh, this is an offensive like 2023. I mean, the amount of people is there, but I think this is not like to push over the Russian line, but more to stabilize that area of front once for all, essentially, or at least for a longer time, because this is one of the areas where the Russians were pushing as well.
Yeah. So, you know, there was a quite unfortunate period before Christmas where the Russians were pushing from the east towards Huliapole and managed to actually overrun Huliapole at some point. My suspicion personally is that this, whatever Ukrainians are doing here, is somewhat of a reaction to that, and trying to secure this area, because basically stopping any Russian further advances along this axis towards Zaporizhzhia is very, very important for Ukraine, as some of the most important defensive lines are just southwest of Huliapole. Yeah, we'll try and get Andrew on. But for now, there's not much we can say about the state of this offensive, other than what we already showed you. So hopefully there will be more news soon. That obviously is going to depend on how the operation is going, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think we're wrapping up, Erlend. Anything else we
Yep.
should cover before we head out?
Oh, well, just, go to Tochnyi.info, check out the article,
And
browse the map. Browse the map. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Head on over to Tochnyi.info. That's where Daniela's article has been published. There's an interactive map there. It's all good stuff. It really helps visualize all the data that is floating around on the internet. So thanks, of course, to Daniela for coming to present the article. Thanks to Stanimir and the panel, which I guess is Erlend, for coming on and talking about all this stuff. We appreciate you guys. And thank you to chat for asking all your great questions and having your discussion in there. Yeah, we always enjoy the feedback from chat. You guys help us understand like what you want to know more about and things like that. So please do give us your feedback and ask any questions you guys have. We do our best to address it all. Yeah, we'll see everyone next week, same time, 2100 Kyiv time. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
On behalf of the brave.